Welcome to Chic Happens, the bi-weekly fashion podcast hosted by me, Celine Manor. On today's episode, Chloe Mal's first ever Vogue cover. Is New York Fashion Week dead? Along with various notable spring-summer 2026 collections. Whether you are a style maven or looking for your fashion fix, Chic Happens will keep you in the loop, so grab your cocktails and let's chat, because in fashion, as in life, Chic happens. That's strong. Okay. A little too much vodka in that one. All right. Ignore me. The hat stays on, princess. Because I am having literally the worst hair day ever. And actually, if you are listening to this and not watching, I'm actually having a really great hair day. And just imagine a very beautiful woman with a very beautiful blowout. Please. Okay. To start off, let's just dive right into it. And if you can hear that, if you're not watching again, that is actually me spanking my October Vogue that just came in the mail. Actually, I think it might have come like a few days ago. I just do not check my mailbox very frequently, but here it is. Chloe Mal's first ever Vogue cover as head of editorial content. She's technically not the editor-in-chief, as that title has been retired by Anna. Weird. Okay. The cover features Gigi Hadid and Kendall Jenner in a sort of like Brokeback Mountain meets Sister Wives meets Yellowstone crossover. If you're not watching, Kendall has on an oversized blue like flannel jacket and Gigi's wearing an almost quilt-like romper. Very like Western, very Americana. Of course, Jenner and Hadid are beautiful as always, but Jenner's a little dead behind the eyes as she is constantly in her editorials, and Hadid unfortunately cannot pick up the slack for her, but overall this just feels very, very safe as a first cover. Now, I'm not really sure if this is like really Chloe Mal's like first cover. It seems a little too soon. Like, I don't know if anyone has any insights on like the logistics of planning a cover and shooting. I just feel like she probably wasn't the creative mind behind this, and it might have been Anna or maybe like a combination. But it does seem a little too soon, though. On the other hand, when she was announced, it was effective immediately. So I guess the responsibility is on her. I will give her a grace period. You don't have to. Obviously, she knows how to bring numbers and engagement in, which is why this cover is confusing me a little bit, because it seems very, very safe. The clothes are gorgeous. So I'm just going to open up to like this actual, like the article in here. So it starts off by saying, Kendall Jenner and Gigi Hadid have a friendship forged in fashion and share a love of the great glamorous outdoors by Chloe Mal, photographed by Lachlan Bailey. I just don't really see like the relevancy of Kendall Jenner and Gigi Hadid's friendship in 2025. Not that they're not relevant, like I think they're always kind of at the forefront, but I just don't really see like this need to make an article about their entire friendship. Like, who cares? I feel like this is so harsh, but not trying to be. Like, I think obviously like they look absolutely gorgeous. What made me laugh though is like this first quote we have from Kendall, and honestly this might be the best picture that like she has taken, like the best photograph she's taken for this shoot. And she says, "I love to feel normal." Like, me too, Kendall. I love feeling normal. And apparently she writes competitively under an alias. So, okay, cool. I especially love this one shot of Gigi's right here. The dress is by Louis Vuitton and the shoes are Ralph Lauren. So that's super gorgeous. And the entire thing is just how much they love the outdoors. Mainly how much they're into the country lifestyle. They like reference the movie Country Strong with Gwyneth Paltrow and Tim McGraw. How they also talk about how like a picture of Gigi's went viral on Tumblr back in the day, and Gigi's like, "Oh my god, me?" Like, yeah, girl. I mean, not really shocking, but I mean, maybe it is for her. It's very fluffy and ultimately doesn't really say much besides reflecting this cultural shift towards more of like a Western aesthetic and country music and everything that's typically like representative of conservatives. However, I will say that taking this aesthetic and culture that's like seen as so like Americana and making it open to everyone, I think can have positive outcomes politically. Just as before, I spoke on like many liberal pop stars, like for example, Beyonce with Cowboy Carter, even Sabrina Carpenter and some of like the country aspects in her music. I mean, it can actually like open up like the aesthetic and make it accessible to everyone, which I think can take the power away from like that kind of culture that we're kind of seeing emerge right now. Also, Gigi really knows how to use the space for her shoots so intentionally, which is really nice. But even though the article itself does kind of give like this, like, it's all about shapes and colors. Like, okay, cool. All right, moving on from this. Is New York Fashion Week dead? All right, don't shoot the messenger. This is just what the streets are saying. The streets are saying. I have never been to New York Fashion Week. I don't live in New York. I'm not there. I don't know, but this is what the streets are saying. That New York Fashion Week is dead. So New York Fashion Week limped to a start this week. And I would just like to point out the fact that like New York is definitely like a huge fashion like hub for the world. It's like one of the heavy hitters that we have. However, Paris has always technically been like the fashion capital of the world, I feel, since like the 17th century. So it's not very surprising that many brands are hopping across the pond rather than showing in New York, which honestly I think is more connected to like commercial hits and mass appeal than like artistry. Now, that's not like an all-encompassing kind of statement. Like, obviously, there's so many great collections, so many great brands and creative directors and designers that showcase in New York Fashion Week. But I do think that, like, of course, capitalism kind of goes hand in hand with New York, America. But there is this like general consensus that designers are playing it way too safe. In her article on the Washington Post website, Rachel Toshkin wrote, looking at the homogeneity of New York's runways, you would think there are zillions of 30, 40, and 50-something women with zillions of dollars to spend on just the right understated skinny, but still wide-leg trouser. She's intelligent. She likes beautiful clothes that don't make too much noise. She's discerning. She has good taste. Not taste. Her own weird whims and passions she can't help but love, even though they're kind of hideous, but rather she is plugged into the covert language of the right table linens, the best understated white sofa, the jewelry brands that make Tina Chowish glass bead necklaces and earrings in Alexander Calder's shapes. Lately, it just seems like these collections are made with one demographic in mind, leading to like this sort of like staleness in these collections. The unity of the event is also very like fragmented due to some of the most influential designers staging their shows outside of the official calendar. For example, Marc Jacobs premiered his fall 2025 collection at the New York Public Library back in July, and Ralph Lauren had a private showing at his studio ahead of the week's official start. Fashion platform KFN was created to reform New York Fashion Week in partnership with the CFDA in order to expand New York Fashion Week's physical and digital footprint and create more accessible avenues for designers to showcase their works. And Paris Fashion Week is also coming up, so we can really go head to head here and see if there are really more exciting things happening on the other side of the Atlantic, but we will just have to wait and see on that. All right, another quick little like insert that I thought was really interesting. Duran Lantink's latest campaign is out, and to me, the whole thing is kind of reminiscent of like a horny teenager who is also a furry and loves boobies. I don't know. So Duran Lantink Fall/Winter 2025 campaign titled DURANIMAL has sparked significant controversy due to its provocative imagery and themes. The campaign, photographed by Jorgen Teller and styled by Jody Barnes, features model Alex Kansani in animal print ensembles and exaggerated silhouettes set against natural environments. Honestly, they kind of just look like they're in a zoo. Central to the controversy is the reintroduction of a molded breastplate, which was first featured in Lantink's Paris runway show earlier this year. This element has been criticized for perpetuating sexist stereotypes and almost making like a spectacle of the female body. Fashion designer Delara Fundagola expressed her disappointment, stating, "Honestly, it's so tiring to see men still use our bodies in this medieval mindset." Oof. The campaign press release describes it as an exploration of, and I quote, "the boundaries between the human and animal, artifice and instinct, beauty and spectacle. However, critics argue that the use of the prosthetic breasts may overshadow the intended commentary, reducing it to a recycled shock tactic rather than a meaningful narrative. Despite the backlash, the campaign has undeniably captured attention," which I guess in marketing is all you could really hope for, reflecting Lantink's ongoing engagement with themes of identity, gender, and performative aspects of fashion. I've said before, I really loved his vagina pants for Janelle Monáe's Pink music video. Those pants were truly beautifully constructed and disruptive back in 2019. But I do think that sometimes artists want to keep pushing the envelope, and instead of creating something like innovative and conversation starting and creating meaningful discomfort by art, it just becomes cheap and low hanging. Example outside of fashion, American Horror Story. I will not be elaborating. I have a bone to pick with American Horror Story. But anyways, I digress. Moving on to our actual spring summer 2026 runway shows. We will start off with Khaite. Khaite is a New York-based label founded by designer Catherine Holstein. Holstein often emphasizes the subtlety, femininity, confidence, and texture in her clothing. She tends to work from what might seem like a classical or foundational pieces themselves, but disrupts or like twists them in unexpected ways. So for spring 2026, her theme centered around confidence found in insecurity, self-consciousness, and being an outsider. She literally says the whole idea of confidence that people always talk about, I really find that in insecurity and being self-conscious. So she frames this as like a space of creative tension between polished appearances and rawness, control and deconstruction. Holstein asks herself constantly, like, how do you twist this? How do you take something familiar, even like classic, and then you reshape it so it's kind of like off balance or charged? And she goes back to her childhood experiences of like cutting up clothing for dolls and modifying them as a part of her creative reference. That sense of like playfulness and rebellion underlies much of the collection we see this season. Risk is a keyword as well. Ripping, stuffing, asymmetry, juxtaposition. She wants the elegant and the naive to sort of like live together. The show opens up with a leather blazer spliced up the sides so it like hangs at an angle, almost embracing the body. And this sets the tone for the whole show, tailoring with dislocation, structure meeting vulnerability. Dresses are similarly like disassembled and then reassembled back together. For example, there's like a strapless cocktail dress with a fluttery bodice made by like tearing away from the corset and then stuffing tulle inside of it, kind of like Frankensteining certain pieces. The goal is to, and I quote, make it a little bit stupid, which I love. Like, I love that because it completely ties into what she's like going for with like that self-consciousness, like something really like stupid, but like that works, you know, in order to just like push these boundaries. And embroidery also appears in like this playful, naive form on button-ups, a pinafore top or dress with a sharply defined bosque waist, double-breasted coat dresses, etc. Khaite has largely been associated with a stealth New York woman aesthetic, just like this quiet luxury and refined understatement. For spring 2026, though, there is a noticeable shift with everything that we have been talking about, and there's more boldness in the experimentation of the brand. Even though Holstein still works with elegance, she's way more willing this season to like make, or I guess the next season, my bad. She's willing to make the pieces uncomfortable, asymmetrical, or raw. The brand also continues expanding its geographical presence, so it will be opening, or it actually did just open a store in Melrose in Los Angeles. It's the 5th store they've opened. So possibly this could create a wider audience for Khaite, and it might also result maybe in a little bit of cross-pollination of style influences for future shows. Basically, Khaite here is not just showing pretty garments, but posing questions about like identity, confidence, like what beauty looks like when it's imperfect, the idea of taking something apart that's familiar and then reassembling it, and then in that way giving it more power. In regards to her method, I think that being able to pinpoint your own discomfort, not just in clothing, but in all aspects of life, and being able to like sit in that discomfort and then draw power from that thing that tries to limit you is a very fascinating source of inspiration to draw from. And for me, it does create one of the more like stronger collections this season, or at least like the more conceptually interesting collections this season. All right, next up, Alexander Wang's comeback. Oh my God, Alexander Wang's controversial comeback is one of the most debated stories in fashion right now. After multiple sexual assault allegations surfaced in 2020 and 2021 from men and trans individuals, Wang initially denied them, but then later met with his accusers and their lawyers, issuing a public apology and promising to, and I quote, do better. All right. While his reputation did take a hit in the West, and his branding actually remained pretty strong, particularly in Asia, where about half of revenue is generated, and it has now secured its first outside investment from Challengers Capital and Younger Group to expand retail and strengthen direct-to-customer sales. When is there ever truly consequences for men? This season, Wang is staging his first return to New York Fashion Week since 2018, so it's definitely been a while, with his spring 2026 collection, The Matriarch, which is dedicated to the strength of women and inspired by his mother. signaling a more mature and heritage-driven aesthetic compared to like, I guess sort of like his past like party heavy aesthetic that he had going on. The show reflects both a business and creative rebrand. It leans into his Chinese heritage, maternal strength, and, you know, keeps that refined tailoring. But its reception is polarizing. I mean, you know, who would have thought? Critics argue his apology was vague and the fashion industry was way too quick to embrace him back, while others frame it as a story of rehabilitation and redemption. For the wider industry and consumers, his return does raise some questions about cancel culture, accountability, and whether we can or should separate art from the artist, especially when commerce and celebrity power play such decisive roles. The collection, The Matriarch, is the brand's 20th anniversary milestone. The show was packed up, according to reports. Again, that's what the streets are saying. I'm not been there. I'm not there. But Wang's cast of models were also very new, no big stars, which I hate to say, I do love that. But I'm not going to credit him for it. I think it's very easy to just get like a bunch of new faces instead of heavy hitters. Anyways, The Matriarch to Wang is an ode to the alpha female, a nod to his mother, Wang, who is a successful businesswoman. It's just hard for me personally, and I would love to hear other people's thoughts, I guess. But it's very hard to imagine this as like genuine. We have the familial bond that is real with his mother, and his mother is a successful businesswoman, so that's obviously genuine. But I can't help but wonder if this is real, or are you putting this like feminist spin on this show to soften your reemergence into New York Fashion Week? Are you like using this like leftist talking point and women to sanitize your image and just go like, hey guys, actually like I'm super woke? I guess that's between God and Wang. I don't know, but it obviously is not stopping criticism. Moving on to Calvin Klein. So Veronica Leone's sophomore Calvin Klein collection staged at the Brand Foundation in NYC for spring 2026. It leaned hard into this like sensual minimalism, sort of reviving that mid-90s Klein while imbuing the collection with modern intimacy, wearability, and a sense of this lived-in freedom. Klein said over the summer with Vogue, I really always thought about the American woman, and times had changed. There was a freedom that women were experiencing. Meanwhile, Leone had the word around the idea of freedom that's so central to America theoretically, and infused that with the brand across the men's and women's pieces. So the collection felt inspired by real New York moments, according to critics, like very reminiscent of like early morning coffee runs, bodega visits, late nights, offhand chic of the city, with trench coats, double collar leather dusters, mismatched suits, sheer and laser cut textures, and nods to the brand's underwear heritage. Shout out to my Calvins. They are so comfortable. Love them. I need to actually buy new ones. They have holes in them now. Yeah, it's very reminiscent of girls in the East Village. The color palette like stays grounded in neutrals like black, white, beige, gray, like obviously very like Calvin Klein colors, but there's occasional like punches of color like bubblegum pink and glossy accents. Tailoring remains central, but with like these experimental touches like pom-pom harnesses and fringe. Reviewers kind of praised how the clothes balanced archive homage and contemporary edge, though some pieces were viewed as overworked and threatening to dilute the simplicity of Calvin Klein. Overall, I think Leone's collection did show that the brand is being thoughtfully relaunched. It's less about spectacle and more about atmosphere. There's like a subtle tension between exposure and restraint, and what it means to build a wardrobe that feels both recognizable but freshly alive. But again, I want to point out that outside of like this like fashion snow globe that we sort of live in, how much are these clothes really resonating with real New York moments, like that it says that it draws inspiration from, or that the critics also kind of like see? Is it sort of like this fantastical like idea of fashion in New York, or is it actually rooted in reality? Which I think that sometimes the reality can actually provide a lot more interesting design inspiration. The East Village has always been like this cool neighborhood from what I know of like young people and bohemian types. But as New York becomes increasingly unlivable in terms of the cost, and there are so many complaints of influencers that just like follow trends instead of setting them, is there true inspiration coming from these places? Again, I don't know. I'm not from New York, but I would love to hear the perspective of people who were truly born and raised there. Like, does this really like ring true to you? Or do you think that like it merely scratches the surface with like this idea of what fashion in New York is like going back to like what Rachel Toshkin wrote, you know, about like the New York woman, that you would think there are like zillions of these women out there. Is it really just like, you know, appealing to this hypothetical woman that exists? All right, moving on to Wiederhoeft. Jackson Wiederhoeft titled his spring-summer collection Last Works, and in his own words backstage, the show reflected a period of risk, experimentation, and joy. I quote, he said, "It was so joyful to be able to work on these ideas for a year. I took so many risks, and there was so much newness that was exciting and fun for me." He described the collection as about a sense of rediscovery. He says, and I quote, "When I was doing research, if I was between two things, I would always try to choose what was unexpected." The setting was intimate. It was at his Midtown atelier. Wiederhoeft also admitted that casual ready-to-wear had mostly taken a back seat this season, given giving priority to gowns and formal wear. He said, "We took a break from menswear because honestly, we didn't have the clientele. I want the grooms to be in on the business too." So in sum, the show felt like an audition for what the brand can become: romantic, technically ambitious, less about the spectacle overall, but more about like details and craftsmanship. So not much to say on my end, except the corsets are stunning. I really suggest taking a look. They are gorgeous. Honestly, that was like all I could focus on. Oh my God, when I talk, like I feel like I talk so fast. I'm like truly like I get so parched. And I don't think the alcohol in like these cocktails are helping. Like honestly, when I say grab a cocktail in the beginning of this, like I'm being serious, like grab a cocktail. Like you're listening to me, you know, like you're cleaning around the house. Hell, have like a cocktail with you. Working, have a cocktail. I'm just kidding. But yeah, like genuinely, guys, like get a cocktail. Like, all right. Anyways, moving on. Toteme, the Stockholm-based label from Ellen Kling and Carl Lindman, stayed true to its roots this season while finding subtle ways to deepen its language of minimalism. I mean, that is a skill all in itself. How does one take minimalism and find ways to deepen it or give it a little bit of a spin? The spring 2026 collection was almost entirely monochrome, with black and white dominating. But if you take a little bit of a closer look, there were like faint injections of like washed out pinks, sun-faded greens, earthly neutrals that felt like the clothing was already, I guess, softened by life and nature. The beauty of Toteme lies in what you notice only after sitting with it. So it has oversized cotton shirts with just the right amount of stiffness, pleated trousers that carry a certain lived-in ease, sheer layers that move like breath, and crinkled fabrics that almost looked as though they were accidentally rumpled, yet carefully designed to be so. Accessories are equally stripped back. We have flat sandals, wide belts, slouchy shoulder bags that feel timeless rather than seasonal, which is nice. What's striking is how Toteme's consistency has become its superpower. At a time when so many brands are reinventing themselves collection by collection, as we've already spoken of with the few brands that we've kind of gone over, Kling and Lindman have chosen refinement over reinvention. So spring-summer 2026 is distilled their aesthetic to its essence, clothes that whisper instead of shout, but in doing so, they create an undeniable presence. It's just perfect for the woman that like wants to wear their clothes and have it move with them rather than speak over them, I suppose. Personally, I'm way too colorful in my own personal taste for Toteme, but if you are into like this like sort of Scandi, clean, like casually put together aesthetic, it's worth checking out for sure. Diotima, launched by Rachel Scott 4 years ago. Diotima just hit the runways for the first time. And I love the backstory of this. Like I love the inspiration that goes with this. So Scott was inspired by Carnival in the Caribbean after stating how angry she had been since last fall. Reading between the lines, the election. To me, this is the most interesting inspo of the season and very topical to the current climate. So Carnival, let's just kind of take a little bit of like a dabble in it. Like I'm not like the most informed, but I looked up a little bit about the history of Carnival. I think everyone's heard of it, but might not actually know like what Carnival is and how it kind of came to be. So Carnival is a traditional cultural festival celebrated throughout the Caribbean islands, and it features music, dancing, and colorful costumes along with street parties. But on a deeper level, it's the celebration of rebellion against enslavement. It was historically born in the 18th century with its origins thought to be from Trinidad and Tobago, where enslaved people engaged in a ritual called con brûlé, where the enslaved people, like, please actually give me a little bit of grace on that one. I think it's con brûlé, where the enslaved people would burn sugarcane intended for sale, so they would resist the plantation by destroying its most valuable export. This continued even after slavery was abolished, and now Carnival is spread throughout the Caribbean, with each island incorporating like their own culture into the celebration. So Scott says, and I quote, last fall I was super angry, and I'm still angry, but the manifestation of it is very different. I was looking at Carnival in the Caribbean and the diaspora as this moment of resistance against repressive forces. It's a moment of resistance that's rooted in exuberance, joy, and sensuality, and is against any form of domination. And specifically, her inspiration did come from the Carnival of Trinidad, which is why in this collection, she has bright color pairings like guava and lime green, or neon pink and gray with like fun shapes and silhouettes. But also she wanted to make the collection wearable for women in the real world. One character in Carnival is Sailor Moss, which is a traditional masquerade character inspired by the uniforms and behaviors of colonial sailors. And they often engage in like this high energy, like dancing and acrobatics. We see elements of this character as well throughout the show, appearing in like these like square sailor collars. Another prevailing piece is Scott's version of the traditional Carnival cage bras, which were transposed onto tailored jackets paired with wide leg trousers. Very sexy, but very powerful. Micro sequin designs also, which is Scott's signature, can be seen in bikinis and swimwear in this collection. Additionally, the shredded rayon was used to mimic traditional feathers. Scott wanted to capture the sensuality of Carnival and simultaneously resist heteronormativity. I think this is really interesting. Honestly, this is like my favorite, like I said, backstory to a collection of this season, and I really enjoyed it. Definitely worth checking out. And I think that I think fashion is always very political. So it is nice to see like someone take, like I said, a more like topical approach to their inspiration for the upcoming season. Because that's what fashion is supposed to be. Fashion is culture. It's supposed to be disruptive. It's supposed to have a meaning behind it. It's not just supposed to be like these pretty clothes that you look at. So shout out to Rachel Scott. This collection was really great. Okay, Altuzarra. Joseph Altuzarra's Spring 2026 show was one of his most experimental in recent years. So he blended old world romance with surrealist distortion. He played with silhouettes that feel like slightly off-kiltered, but like in the very best way. There's like a balloon trouser that's curved out dramatically before tapering. There's funnel neck coats with exaggerated structures. There's leather and suede jackets cut with like swing back shapes that create unusual volume as the models walk down the runway. There was like faux fur for spring. It's like, but like in a very jarring way. There were collaged feather effects that were like very like childishly playful. Some dresses looked like they had been pieced together from like surreal collages, while others carried echoes of 40s Hollywood elegance, but always again twisted into like something slightly uncanny. But the message is clear. Altuzarra is not content with beautiful clothes alone. He wants to disrupt what beauty means, and also the craftsmanship is exquisite. Every distorted detail was executed with precision, and the result was a show that asked its audience to see fashion as both fantasy and a puzzle. We're moving on to Proenza Schouler. Diotima founder Rachel Scott kicked off her debut at Proenza Schouler after its founders decamped for Loewe in Paris earlier this year. Again, another sign of people jumping ship to the other side of the pond, but we'll see. Though her first full collection will not be revealed until 2026 completely. But about the collection so far, Scott said, this is really is a collaboration with the team, getting to know the language of the brand and silhouette and color, but then starting to inject a little bit of my own point of view. She said, there are a lot more textures than you would normally see. Some of the textures I was thinking about, like this idea of memory of them, and there's like this motif of chrysanthemums on a green background that resembles sea glass that Scott herself describes as see-through glass. There's also like this cotton laser cut into florets to create almost an echo of a print. And while accessories and the knit pieces nod to Scott's roots at Diotima. As a woman, Scott understands the intimacy a woman can develop with her favorite clothes, and she imbues the line with a very feminine point of view. It's a collection that feels both respectful of what Proenza Schouler has been and quietly bold in showing what it might become under this new leadership, a prelude rather than a reinvention. Designed to draw you in and see the details, the textures, the way something unfinished can just feel more alive. So I'm really excited to see Rachel Scott and her future at Proenza Schouler, and just kind of see where she takes the brand, especially when it's fully released in 2026. We will come back to it. All right, Coach. Oh, Coach under Stuart Vevers has been steadily evolving from a brand associated with teenage novelty into one that balances playfulness and maturity, and Spring/Summer 2026 was a strong step forward in that evolution. I love Coach. I think it's obviously, I think it used to be way more accessible, and there's like this whole conversation of how like Coach became devalued because everyone could afford it, like back in the early 2000s, and then it kind of fell off, but now it's like back again. I love Coach, especially Coachtopia. I just love the designs. I think they're really playful and fun and cute, and I think that they're like good quality as well for the price that you pay. Of course, it's more expensive than it used to be. My first designer purse was from my grandma. My grandma got me a Coach purse, and I still have it to this day. It's like the classic, like pink and like the brown with the Coach logo on it, and I love to wear it. It's such a fun little like throwback. But for this Spring/Summer 2026, it was a strong step forward. The show carried a grounded optimism. The clothes looked more worn in, lived in, they looked loved, but there was deliberate artistry as well. So we saw some distressed knits that looked like maybe like an heirloom you get from your grandma's attic, frayed hems that dangled casually over floor sweeping pants, and patchwork details that recall more Americana craft traditions. But this wasn't nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. So there was also sleek, checked tailoring, upcycled workwear, silhouettes, and patchwork leather jackets that look distinctly modern. The accessories were also the highlights. And honestly, this is a side note, but I've noticed that like a lot of brands are kind of like shying away from accessories, or I guess more so like brand styling of celebrities, very much shying away from accessories. But so it was nice to see that the accessories were the highlights for this show. So there was like a coin purse necklace dangling with Lucky Charms, a revamped version of the Kiss Lock bags, and miniature duffels that nodded to the house's heritage while feeling fresh. Even the footwear had a sense of softness, almost ballet-like sandals that contrasted with the grit of raw denim and weathered leather. And also, like what is kind of happening with this like collection is we're building like a Coach that feels grown up without losing its sense of fun. And again, I think that's what made it so popular again, is that Coach seems to have like this sense of just like fun and joie de vivre. The color palette also reflected that. A lot of like sun-faded creams and browns mixed with the like occasional burst of like saturated colors. It was kind of described like catching sunlight through a dirty window, which I think is like a very apt description of it. In short, this is a collection that reimagined youthful spirit as something with staying power, nostalgic but forward looking. Again, big fan of Coach, so I'm really excited to see like what comes out. I love the pieces, so I'm going to be keeping up with them for sure personally. All right, moving on to Tory Burch, our second to last brand. Tory Burch's season was described as, by herself, as one of joy and optimism, a response to what she called the dark times we are all experiencing. Again, big fan of when fashion brands nod to what's going on in the current day, because I think it's really important. Her creative direction leaned into imperfection, so frayed edges, deliberately crumpled or aged fabrics, sleeves that seem like worn with some vintage touches to it, and embellishments that read more like crafty than polished, which is fun. On balancing heritage and risk, she said, with the dark times we're all experiencing, I wanted to feel joy and optimism, but also with a realness to things. I think with each season, it's more of a dialogue. We're learning more about what women are craving and what they want. So the show notes for Burch also read, and I quote, "For Spring/Summer 2026, we were thinking about the complexity of women and different facets of their style, femininity and strength, precision and imperfection," end quote. She also pulled a lot of like personal references in the collection, like a piped blazer inspired by a jacket that her own father wore. And there's this like monogram embroidery referencing antique samplers, even including her design team's initials on some of those samplers as well. Also, she made a point about how embellishment was richer compared to previous seasons and that she wanted to use a barbed wire motif for some time, though, and I quote, again, this was the first season, she felt the prototypes actually worked. So that's really nice to see something that like a designer has been working on that she felt like it worked and she could debut it. Shoes and accessories got attention as well. Big fan of that. Pointed pumps finished with pearl threads or metal hardware, playful bags like the Lee Radziwill styles, and handbags that echo both function and elevated form. The overall tone, grounded optimism, elevated Americana with edges, clothes meant for longevity and for wearers to take ownership of. So that's super fun. I was never really a huge fan of Tory Burch. I thought that it was like basic as a brand because I was only kind of familiar with the Tory Burch sandals. So I never really wanted them. But then when I got my first big girl job, I was looking at shoes and oh my God, like Tory Burch had the cutest like loafers and ballet flats with like these really like interesting like styles. Like I think one of the ballet flats I had, it was sort of like, this like brown like snake skin, and then there was this fabric that was like white and like with speckled black on it. I'm not doing a great job of describing it, and if I find it I will add a picture in here for those of you watching. For those of you who are not watching, I still have a beautiful blowout and I'm still a beautiful girl, so just keep imagining that. All right, and then last, Sandy Liang. I love Sandy Liang and this like fantastical world of nostalgia and childhood she creates. Big fan of childhood and nostalgia. I peaked at 8. Her Spring/Summer 2026 collection presented at New York Fashion Week delved into themes of nostalgia and self-creation. So she drew inspirations from her childhood memories and personal history. Specifically, she made a connection with the Fifth Avenue heiress Huguette Clark. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. Like, so sorry if I am not. But basically, she had an obsession with toys. And in this collection, we get to see like this like peek into the life of dollhouses and dolls. Like if you remember, like take yourself back, if you had dollhouses, take yourself back to when you were little and you maybe had a dollhouse with like dolls in there. And sometimes when I was little, I would like imagine them moving around in there when I was sleeping, which is kind of creepy if you think about it now. But back then it was like more magical and cute. But I feel like this is kind of like what she's taking inspiration from. So Liang remarked, you know, Clark was kind of stuck in childhood, and even as she got older, she was obsessed with dollhouses and all of her trinkets. She had a mansion on Fifth Avenue, but it was just filled with rooms of all these toy houses she got commissioned in France and Japan. And throughout the show, like you see very dainty and delicate doll-like clothes, like very lacy. I think there's even like a dress where there's just a bunch of like dolls, like dresses sort of stitched together. However, this isn't the only inspo for this collection. Liang also grew up in Chinatown, so she took influence from the grandmas she would see walking down the street, and some notable points of inspo from these grandmas were their protective sun gear, long sleeves, as well as like the floral prints they would wear and the sandals they would wear as well. And the collection just features like very whimsical elements. Like there's like these tabby shoes that have dancing bunnies on them. There's like this floral princess dress with lace details. There's also oversized care labels inscribed with handwritten mantras like, forgive me for my first kiss, and be present and remember, always speak to yourself kindly. The show was set up against a backdrop featuring a giant like 10-foot cake, so it just adds a more playful touch to the presentation as well. However, of course, the collection does face criticism for its portrayals of femininity. I think a lot of people are kind of like tired of like the girly childhood aesthetic that she has going on. I'm personally not, but like I get it. Some critics argued that the designs reinforced traditional gender norms and infantilized women, reducing them to mere symbols of girlhood. The juxtaposition of like the youthful motifs and silhouettes led to debates about like the balance between nostalgia and empowerment in women's fashion. While some appreciate like these whimsical elements, others feel that the collection kind of perpetuates outdated stereotypes about femininity. Despite the controversy, her collection does showcase her ability to blend personal nostalgia with contemporary fashion, and it does spark conversations about the evolving representation of women in the fashion industry. This is really complicated because I think it's a very hard like line to kind of stay on. Like it's very, very thin. there is like a point in saying that maybe this does like infantilize women, but also like I think she just appeals more to like women who maybe it's not just like a fleeting trend or like a fleeting idea of, you know, nostalgia and the girlishness of childhood. I personally really love it. Like I love Sunny Angels. I love like childhood nostalgia, but of course, like as a grown woman, it's difficult to kind of like put those two things together. Like, are we infantilizing ourselves? Are we leaning into the trad wife aesthetic? Or are we taking these things that you know, traditionally young girls wear and kind of elevating them and making them more important? Because, you know, girls' interests, especially little girls, they're always so, I guess, like looked down on and not seen as important, almost seen as like frivolous and like silly. So I don't know, it's a really difficult conversation, honestly. Like I'm a big fan. I do think that there could be like a little bit more maybe like reinvention and innovation in some of these looks, because it does genuinely feel a little too cohesive with her past collections. But I'm a fan, so I think it genuinely just depends on like how much into this aesthetic are you invested in, like how important is it to you, and how much a part of your actual like day-to-day do you like incorporating these types of pieces. I think for some people they might get bored of it, but I personally am not. So I think it just kind of like depends. It is really hard though to like reconcile sort of like this childish like girlishness nostalgia with grown women. I mean, and then it kind of like brings up the conversation, I guess, of like, oh, like this is a grown ass woman and she likes childish things. But isn't that kind of like, oh my God, I'm literally getting like, I'm literally thinking of the scene of like, I can't get that childlike feeling. Like, how old are you? Like, I think that there's definitely like just a line drawn between people that are like, you're an adult, grow the fuck up. Like, why are you wearing this stuff? Like, why do you care about it? And then there's another part that's just like, hey, like I still enjoy these things. Like I'm still a young girl on the inside. I still carry like that youthful energy within me. Like, and while maybe like I'm not sitting there and like playing with dolls or like and opening up like getting like these doll houses, like there's still like almost an aesthetic like fondness that a lot of people have towards these things. And I also understand both sides. Like I get it. But surprisingly controversial now. But yeah, those are basically that's just a rundown of all the spring summer collections that I was interested in. I hope that like resonated with some people or gave a little bit of background. But thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Chic Happens. Always love talking to you guys. Drink up those cocktails and have a wonderful day. See you next time. Thanks for tuning into Chic Happens. Episodes are available every other Friday at 7 a.m. on all streaming platforms and YouTube. Give us a rating and subscribe to support our podcast, and give us a follow on Instagram to keep up with the latest fashion news.